Hello everybody, McFluffyStuff here, and today we're bringing to you a recap video of our spoiler discussions from Ravnica Allegiance. Before we get too far into this, I would like to thank Seth1691, Thane100, Vitamin K04, and TiltingCrackers for their contributions to the streams, bringing cards to our attention, having some engaging discussions with us, and overall just helping the stream out. So big thanks to you guys. I'm sorry you're not going to be joining me for this. Hopefully down the road we will be able to have a joint recap video made. So today we're going to look back at some of the cards we discussed on stream, where they shook up in the meta, where the deck's kind of placed, and overall see how well we did or did not do on predicting how these cards may or may not have panned out into the meta. We're going to get into it here. First we're going to start off with Priest of Forgotten Gods. This card was brought up by Thane100, and he thought this card out of the gate was going to be really good. Everybody on stream kind of shoved it off to the side. We kind of dismissed this card, but Thane100 was like, no, I really think this card can be good. This card will be discussed with another card later in the video here, and this card actually is very, very good. Yes, it does need a little bit of an engine to get going, but when it does, this card is an absolute blowout. I have been buried alive by this card a few times on stream now. It kind of came out of left field on us, and overall I think this card, while not great, works very well in the deck it is designed to be in. This card definitely overlooked by I think most of us, so I'm glad that Thane brought this card to our attention. Overall it is a great card. It does do nice stuff, it does interesting things, it brews for really weird decks. So I feel like we were wrong on this one, and Thane100 was absolutely correct on it. Now for our next card here, Ravnica, Azorius Renegade. Most of us agreed when we saw this card that it could have been good in Modern and could have been good in Legacy. We dismissed it as a standard card. We really didn't feel it there. I feel like our prediction for it seeing play in Standard was correct. It's not really seeing too much love. For Modern, it's not really seeing too much love either, sadly. There's just not enough free spells currently. It doesn't do enough. Legacy, where we thought it would also be good, it is not really seeing a lot of play. I think it's too fair of a card for a format like Legacy. Now I will say I have seen this card spring up in Vintage, which while we didn't discuss, is very impressive when new cards can be injected into the Vintage format and do stuff. Turns out this card's pretty okay there. It's not great, but it does do work. So for our predictions, I will say we were wrong. This card did not pan out how we thought it would, but the fact that it is seeing play in other formats is still good. Okay, now for one of the long shot cards here that I chose, which was Kea Orzhov's Usurper. When I looked at this card during spoiler season, I looked at the decks we had. We had Jeskai Control, we had Is It Drakes, or maybe Grixis Drakes, you had Arclight decks. So I looked at this card and thought, you know what, for 3 mana this card could actually be a very good surprise card out of the sideboard. It helps eat cards with Jumpstart, like Chemist's Insight, Radical Idea, Beacon Bolt. You also can eat their Arclights when they dump them early. Sadly, this card sees no play. The exiling a mana cost 1 or less in Standard is bad. I think for Modern, Legacy, Vintage, it's just too much mana, it's too slow at 3. The +1, yeah, you can gain life from eating creatures, but it seems like the Jumpstart cards right now are on the down use. You don't see as much Chemist or Insight anymore. You don't see as much of the Drake's list anymore. So I think this card is an absolute bust. It has no place in Standard, and I don't think it's really going to find a home anywhere else either. But we wanted to take a long shot. I looked at the card, I loved it. I still like it, but I don't think it has its place. Now this one, Wilderness Reclamation, everybody looked at, and my first instinct when I first saw it was, okay, so it's kind of a win more card for a control deck. Was I wrong? No, not really. Is it definitely a build around card? It is. Did it help a lot of decks? Sadly it did. It made the Nexus of Fate decks a little better. For the Rug control list, You do have some crazy X spells like Banefire, and the next card we're going to talk about, Electro Dominance, which is pretty good there. It's good for Bant creature decks just because you do get the control counter card, the Frilled Mystic as well. So overall, I think Wilderness Reclamation was an absolute hit in Standard. It brewed for some crazy decks. The card itself is really solid. It still has that kind of win more feel to me, but at the same time, there's also a whole bunch of crazy brews involving this card. So I'm glad to see that this card was actually a good card, because it definitely could have been one of those cards that came out and was just a complete bust. Electro Dominance. We all thought this card was going to be bananas, because with Jeskai control, being able to, at the end of their turn, tase them for 5, put a Teferi into play, tase them for 6, put Niv Mizzet into play, seemed insane. Turns out, it's not. Electro Dominance is not being played. I don't think anyone would consider this card better than Expansion Explosion. Electro Dominance did end up in some modern decks with Living End, which is a very interesting deck. I do think that Electro Dominance will see a little more brew play in formats like Modern. But I think for Standard, the card's a total bust right now. There's better things you can be doing. The idea of this card is great. The overall execution of this card, not so much. Hydroid Krasis. This card I looked at and my first thought was, it's good, it's not that good. How many times do you see X creatures really get played? The answer is, I'm stupid. This card is bananas. If you're playing green, you're going to find a way to splash blue to play the Krasis. If you're playing blue, you're going to find a way to splash the green just for the Krasis. The Explore deck, the green-black Golgari midrange, switched over to Sultai, just pretty much for the Krasis and some better sideboard options. I completely and utterly missed the mark on this card. Everyone else said it was going to be pretty good. I kind of laughed at them. I'm stupid. My hot take on this card was awful. I was completely wrong. Not the first time we've been wrong, but I feel like with this card, it really hurt the pride, because this is kind of like the new darling of Standard right now. This is the card that everyone's trying to play and squeeze into their decks, and we clearly messed that up. Next card we're going to talk about here was submitted by TiltingCrackers, and that is Judith, the Scourge Diva. He saw this card and he thought, you know what, this card is not getting talked about at all. It's not getting any love. He saw real potential in this card. I didn't so much. I don't believe Vitamin K did, but it turns out this card is very, very good. Judith is in the Priest of Forgotten Gods deck, so it gives you a way to slowly burn your opponent out through a locked board state. The Anthem effect to help get in the extra damage. Everything about this card is completely dynamite. Honestly, when I looked at it, to me it was just more of a vanilla card, but we were wrong. Or at least I was wrong. Judith is bananas. Her power levels are ridiculous. The fact that she does come down on turn 3 fits the curve for the deck beautifully. I feel like mistakes were made. We definitely grossly underestimated that card. Next card we're going to talk about here is Prime Speaker Vannifar. Now, we thought there would be some interesting brews with this card in Standard. We thought maybe it was more of a brew around card in Modern to kind of replace the old Birthing Pod lists. Some of us agreed that in Standard it's too hard to hit your chain. Modern we were more split on, just because some people thought this is going to be the next pod deck, and some of us said that's not going to happen. A month in, how are we feeling about our predictions now? I feel like we were definitely right on the Standard. It doesn't seem that there's a ton of Prime Speaker Vannifars running around. Not to say the pod deck can't do stuff. It definitely can. But having a deck that's super teched out in Standard is kind of hard to continually keep your chain going with all the board wipes and that running around right now. Does it see play in Modern? It absolutely does. Is the deck great? That's still to be seen. I feel like right now there's still a ton of people trying to brew with it. We haven't had a whole bunch of spicy Modern action as of late, so I think it's still too early to say it. I think right now I would lump this card into the bust category though. The fact that you have to find ways to force it to have haste, the fact that it is just a 2/4 that does not protect itself, and the fact that the ability is only sorcery speed, I think takes a lot of the power away from this card that it had or could have, and it just falls short of what we need it to do. So I'm going to say it's a bust. I know there's going to be some people who are going to greatly disagree with me. Feel free to do it down below in the comments, but I think that this card just missed the mark for what it wanted to do. And for the last card here we're going to talk about, Light Up the Stage. Now, we looked at this card and went, why is mono red getting more tools? This card is absolutely busted. Were we wrong there? I don't think so. This is a card that mono red definitely needed. Personally, I find it better than things like Experimental Frenzy just because it is one red, essentially drawing you two deeper. The important thing with this card though is that it's seeing a ton of play in Modern. There's the new Spectacle burn deck, playing Light Up the Stage, and the new Skewer the Critics. So, did this card help mono red burn in Modern? Absolutely. Is it the best burn variant? I still don't think so, but it definitely gave mono red some needed tools to help kind of bring its stock back up for Modern. Overall, I think this card is great. Being able to dig two deeper is insane. It works very well for best of 1 decks. It's always going to be a staple in best of 3 decks. I think that this card is going to see a ton of standard play until it rotates. I do think it'll see more and more use in Modern as time goes on. I think some of the other burn decks will figure out what cards they have to cut just to kind of guarantee you're thinning your deck. Anytime you can have draw in a deck like burn, that's where you want to be. So, with that being said, that was a look back at some of the cards. Hit us up in the comments down below if you agree or disagree with some of the ways we've looked at these cards. Did we assess everything right? Do you think I'm wrong with the Vannifar and that it's going to be a good Modern deck? Do you think that Kea still has a place in the format? Anything like that? Or let us know in the comments below what card you were absolutely surprised by that we didn't discuss in this video today.